You've probably heard someone say AI is about to wipe out jobs across this entire country. You've probably also heard someone else say that's completely overblown, just clickbait, nothing to actually worry about. Here's the honest truth. Both of those people are a little bit right, and both of them are a little bit wrong. And instead of guessing which side to believe, I want to show you something released just a few weeks ago. A genuine government report that actually measured what's happening in the Australian job market right now. Not what might happen someday, not some dramatic prediction, actual current data. There's one specific category of job that this report flags as genuinely exposed right now. And there's another part of this story, the part almost nobody talks about, that's honestly a lot more encouraging than the headlines make it sound. Stick with me all the way through, because by the end of this video, you'll actually understand where you personally sit in all of this, instead of just feeling vaguely anxious every time AI comes up in conversation. Hey guys, Daniel here. Welcome back to Daniel Reports. If you're new here, this is where I break down money, work, and the economy in Australia in plain English. No hype, no fear-mongering, just what the actual numbers say. And I'll be upfront, this topic affects basically everyone watching this video in some way, whether you work in an office, on a job site, in a shop, or anywhere in between. I've had so many comments and messages about this one topic that I genuinely had to sit down and do it properly. If that's the kind of grounded, honest breakdown you're after, do me a favor, hit subscribe, tap that like button. It genuinely takes 2 seconds, and it helps this channel keep growing. Alright, let's start with the number that probably brought you to this video in the first place. The International Labour Organization estimates that 32% of Australian jobs could be substantially performed by AI. Let that sit for a second. Nearly 1 in 3 jobs, at least on paper, substantially exposed. That's the kind of number that gets shared around group chats and makes people genuinely nervous about their own future. And honestly, that reaction makes sense on the surface. But here's the thing about a big scary percentage like that. It doesn't tell you anything about timing. It doesn't tell you which specific jobs. And it doesn't tell you what's actually happened so far, as opposed to what could theoretically happen eventually. So let's get some real context, because that's exactly what this video is about. Quick pause here, because I know some of you are already bracing for bad news. Stick with me, because the next part genuinely surprised me while I was researching this one. On the 8th of July this year, just weeks ago, Australia's Department of Employment and Workplace Relations published an official report specifically examining whether AI is already reshaping the job market here. And their actual finding, in their own words, was that there is, quote, no evidence to date of broad AI-driven labour market upheaval in Australia. Read that again. That's not me trying to calm you down. That's the government's own economists, after actually digging through the data properly, saying the mass disruption people are picturing simply hasn't shown up yet. Here's some supporting context for that. Australia's unemployment rate currently sits at around 4.1%, which is genuinely close to historic lows. And over the past 12 months, the country has actually added more than 300,000 new jobs, even as AI adoption inside Australian businesses has been accelerating the whole time. If AI were quietly gutting the job market at scale right now, that unemployment number simply wouldn't look like this. It would be climbing steadily, not sitting near record lows. My honest take on this part. I don't think that means AI isn't changing anything, because it clearly is. But it does mean the apocalyptic version of this story, the one where robots replace millions of Australians almost overnight, genuinely isn't what the current data shows happening right now. It's a bit like how every winter, someone predicts a genuinely brutal flu season is coming. And sometimes it is rough, but most years it ends up being fairly manageable, provided people actually pay attention and take sensible precautions along the way, rather than either panicking early or completely ignoring the warning altogether. Now, I don't want to swing too far the other way either, because there is a real specific piece of this story that deserves your genuine attention, so let's talk about who's actually most exposed. According to Jobs and Skills Australia and the Reserve Bank, only around 4% of Australian jobs are considered highly exposed to automation. But a further 21% sit in what's called medium to high exposure, meaning AI can't fully replace the role yet, but it's already reshaping a significant chunk of what that job actually involves day to day. The roles flagged as most exposed are clerical, administrative, and data entry positions, across sectors like financial services, utilities, and government processing. And when you look at which industries have adopted AI fastest, the pattern becomes pretty clear. Property services leads the pack with around 69% adoption. Finance and insurance sits at 65%. Business services comes in at 61%. Here's a daily life way to think about this. Imagine a job where most of your day used to be spent manually typing information from one system into another, checking it, correcting it, and re-entering it again somewhere else. That kind of repetitive, rules-based work is exactly the sort of thing AI tools have gotten genuinely good at handling quickly and cheaply, without needing a coffee break or a sick day. If that description sounds like a decent chunk of your actual workday, you're honestly in the group that deserves the closest attention in this entire conversation, not out of panic, but out of genuine awareness. Now here's the part of this story that I think gets buried under all the scary headlines, and honestly it's the part that changed how I think about this whole topic while researching it. Between 2019 and 2024, jobs that are considered highly exposed to AI didn't shrink overall, they actually grew by around 10% net. Break that down further, and it gets even more interesting. Roles where humans work alongside AI to boost their own output, what's called augmentable roles, grew by 47%. And roles where AI can independently handle certain tasks, automatable roles, still grew by 45%. Think about that for a second. The exact categories of jobs that sound the most threatened on paper have actually been expanding in headcount, not shrinking. And there's a specific example that captures this trend perfectly. According to LinkedIn's most recent Jobs on the Rise report, the fastest growing job title in the entire country right now is AI engineer, with typical salaries ranging from $130,000 to $170,000. There's also a broader signal worth mentioning here. Demand for AI and machine learning related skills has surged by roughly 245% since 2023, according to recent workforce research. That's not a niche trend anymore. That's employers actively rewiring what they're looking for across almost every industry. Here's my honest take on why this is happening, because I think it's genuinely important to understand the mechanism, not just the outcome. A lot of Australian businesses right now are dealing with real labour shortages, not a surplus of workers. So instead of using AI purely to cut headcount, many employers are using it to squeeze more output out of the staff they already have, or genuinely struggle to find enough of in the first place. That's a very different story to the one most headlines are telling you. So let's talk about what's actually happening on the ground, inside real jobs, because I think this is where the truth genuinely lives, somewhere in the middle of the two extremes. Picture a bookkeeper who used to spend around 80% of their working week on manual data entry and maybe 20% on actual advisory work for their clients. Now, with AI handling a lot of that repetitive entry and reconciliation automatically, that same bookkeeper might spend closer to 30% of their time on data entry and 50% or more on genuine advisory work, the higher value part of the job that clients actually pay for. Their job title hasn't changed, their employer hasn't changed, but the actual shape of their working week looks completely different than it did a couple of years ago. That's honestly the pattern playing out across a huge number of Australian roles right now. Not disappearance, but genuine transformation. Now, I do want to be fair and give you the fuller picture here, because I don't think it's honest to pretend there's no disruption at all, and I'm not going to pretend everything is fine for everyone. McKinsey estimates that up to 1.3 million Australians, roughly 9% of the entire workforce, will need to transition into different roles by the year 2030. At the same time, roughly 200,000 entirely new AI-centric jobs are projected to be created across that same period. Meanwhile, separate modelling suggests AI could add as much as $116 billion to the Australian economy over the next decade. Those sectors like agriculture and mining are each expected to lose several thousand roles as automation reduces demand for certain kinds of manual labour there specifically. So yes, there is genuine churn coming. People will need to shift what they do, and for some, that transition won't be simple or comfortable. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that's a painless process for everyone involved, because for a lot of people, it genuinely won't be, and I think it's important I don't sugarcoat that part. But churn and total disappearance are two very different stories, and right now the actual data lines up much closer to the first one. Here's the part I think deserves genuine attention, almost more than the job loss headlines themselves. Skills required for AI-exposed occupations are currently changing around 66% faster than skills required for roles that aren't exposed to AI at all. Here's what that actually means in plain English. Even if your specific job never technically gets replaced, what your employer expects you to know and be able to do is shifting considerably faster than it used to. And that gap can quietly widen if you're not paying any attention to it at all. Think of it like driving on a road where the speed limit keeps rising every few months. Your car hasn't broken down, you're still moving forward just fine. But if you don't gradually adjust your own pace to match the road around you, you're going to find yourself falling further and further behind everyone else without any single dramatic moment where it suddenly became obvious that you'd fallen behind. So what's the actually smart, practical response to all of this, rather than either panicking or completely ignoring it? First, get genuinely comfortable with whatever AI tools already exist in your specific industry. You don't need to learn to code, and you don't need a computer science degree. Understanding how to competently use AI assistance and automation tools relevant to your own field puts you meaningfully ahead of a lot of your peers, almost immediately, and it genuinely doesn't take that long to get comfortable with the basics. Second, lean deliberately into the skills AI still genuinely struggles to replicate well. Critical thinking, creativity, nuanced judgment calls, building real relationships and trust with actual people. Those are the exact skills that tend to matter more, not less, as automation quietly handles more of the repetitive mechanical parts of a job. Third, if you're in one of those more exposed roles we talked about earlier, it's genuinely worth having an honest conversation with your manager about where your specific team is heading with AI adoption, rather than waiting to find out by surprise somewhere down the line. Most workplaces would rather have that conversation early with someone who's engaged than deal with it later as a difficult surprise. And finally, take a bit of comfort in this next number because I think it's genuinely reassuring and it doesn't get anywhere near enough attention. Around 80% of small businesses in Australia are already using or actively planning to adopt some form of AI. But the overwhelming majority of them are approaching it specifically to augment their existing team's output, not to replace their people entirely. Jobs and Skills Australia's own research actually backs this up directly, finding that AI currently has, in their words, a greater capacity to augment work than to automate it outright. My honest take here, and this is genuinely just my own view based on everything I've read for this video, I don't think the right response to AI is fear, and I don't think it's denial either. I think it's staying genuinely informed and making small, steady adjustments over time, rather than either freezing up completely or assuming absolutely nothing about your job will ever need to change. So let's bring this all together, because I know we've covered a lot of ground in this one. Some jobs, particularly clerical, administrative, and repetitive data processing roles, are genuinely facing real pressure right now, and that pressure is not some distant future hypothetical. It's happening in real Australian workplaces today. At the same time, overall employment across the country keeps growing, unemployment remains near historic lows, and the government's own fresh analysis found no evidence yet of the kind of broad, sweeping disruption that dominates so many alarmist headlines online. Roles once considered highly exposed to automation have actually been expanding in headcount, not shrinking. And most businesses adopting AI right now are using it to support their existing staff, not to quietly replace them altogether. Here's my honest take to close this one out properly. AI isn't some distant future threat anymore, and it's also not some overnight apocalypse either. It's a gradual, uneven shift, hitting some roles harder and faster than others, while genuinely creating new opportunity elsewhere at the exact same time. The people who come out ahead through all of this generally won't be the ones who ignored it completely, and they probably won't be the ones who panicked either. They'll be the ones who stayed paying attention and adjusted a little at a time, well before they were ever actually forced to. If this video helped you make sense of where you personally sit in all of this, drop a comment and let me know how much is AI actually being used in your specific industry right now, and honestly, has it changed what your day-to-day work actually looks like yet? I read every single comment, and I'm genuinely curious how different this looks depending on what field you're in. And if you know someone who's been quietly stressing about this exact topic, maybe a mate in an admin role, or someone who works in finance or data entry, send this video their way. Solid context genuinely beats vague anxiety every single time, especially with a topic that gets exaggerated as often as this one does. I'll keep tracking how this story develops, because with AI adoption accelerating this quickly across Australian industries, I genuinely don't think this is the last time we'll need to revisit these numbers. Hit subscribe if you want grounded, data-backed breakdowns like this one, instead of another dramatic headline. I'm Daniel, this has been Daniel Reports, and I'll see you in the next one.